332 BCE, Gaza. Alexander has just done the impossible at Tyre. For 7 months, an island fortress had blocked his road south. He built a causeway through the sea, brought siege engines against walls rising from the water, and finally forced his way into a city that believed the Mediterranean itself would protect it. Now the coast behind him is almost secure. Phoenician fleets have changed sides. Persian naval power in the eastern Mediterranean has been weakened. Egypt lies ahead, rich, ancient, and strategically priceless. But one city still stands in his path: Gaza. In 332 BCE, it controls the road into Egypt, and Gaza refuses to open its gates. The city stands on high ground near the edge of the desert. Its walls rise above the plain. Its commander, Beatties, has prepared for a long siege. Supplies have been gathered, defenders are ready. Even Alexander's engineers doubt it can be taken by normal methods. Alexander cannot ignore it.
If he marches into Egypt while Gaza remains hostile behind him, his supply lines are exposed. A Persian garrison would sit on the road between the Levant and Egypt, waiting for the moment to strike. So Alexander must take the city. But Gaza is not Tyre. There's no sea to cross, no island to connect to the shore. This time, the problem is height. The walls stand above him. His siege engines cannot easily reach. His army has already endured months at Tyre, and now another fortress demands blood, time, and patience. Then the first assaults fail. Alexander is wounded. The defenders hold. The siege drags on.
And suddenly, the road to Egypt depends on whether Alexander can break a city that has every reason to resist until the end. By the end of this video, you'll see how Alexander turned Gaza's height against it, why Beatties refused to surrender, how Macedonian engineering broke the fortress, and why the fall of this city opened the final road to Egypt. To understand Gaza, we need to begin with Tyre. Earlier in 332 BCE, Alexander had faced one of the hardest sieges of his career. Tyre was an island city with strong walls, proud defenders, and access to the sea. But when Tyre finally fell, the message was clear: no city on the coast could assume it was safe. But Alexander's campaign was not about punishment alone. It was about control. He needed the eastern Mediterranean coast secure before moving deeper into the empire. The Persian fleet depended on coastal bases. Egypt, still under Persian rule, lay south. If Alexander controlled the coast, he could isolate Persian naval power and move toward Egypt without leaving major threats behind him. Most cities had already chosen submission. Gaza chose resistance. The man responsible was Beatties, the Persian commander of the city. Ancient sources present him as determined and loyal. Gaza guarded the main approach into Egypt, and if it delayed Alexander long enough, it might buy time for Persian resistance elsewhere. Beatties had prepared carefully. The city was supplied for a siege. Its defenders included local troops and mercenaries, including Arab forces according to ancient tradition. The walls were strong, and the city stood high above the surrounding ground. That height was the key.
A siege engine is terrifying when it can reach the wall. But if the wall rises far above it, the machine loses power. Alexander's engineers looked at Gaza and saw a fortress that could not be easily stormed. The city was built on an elevated mound, and the ground around it gave the attackers no simple approach. Alexander's answer was direct. If the ground was too low, raise the ground. He ordered his men to build massive siege mounds. Earth, stone, timber, and rubble were hauled into place. The Macedonians began creating artificial platforms high enough to bring engines against the walls. It was hard labor under enemy fire. The defenders fired from the walls, launched sorties against the siege works, and tried to burn or damage the machines before they could be brought close enough to matter. Every basket of earth pushed forward came at a cost. Alexander had just spent months building a road through the sea at Tyre. Now at Gaza, he was building a mountain against a city. At first, the defenders held. The Macedonians could not break through quickly. The siege works were difficult to complete. The walls were strong. The city had no intention of surrendering. During one attack, the defenders struck hard enough to put Alexander himself in danger. Ancient accounts describe him being wounded during the siege, likely by a missile while fighting near the works. It was not the first time Alexander had exposed himself in battle, and it would not be the last. But the wound mattered. Gaza was not a symbolic obstacle. It was a real fight.
Bodies and his men had forced the most successful commander in the world to bleed before their walls. For Alexander, that only made surrender less likely. He had built his authority on momentum. Granicus had opened Asia Minor. Issus had driven Darius from the field. Tyre had shown that even an island city could fall. If Gaza stopped him now, after Tyre, the entire message of inevitability would weaken. So the siege continued. More mounds rose. Engines were moved into position. Some of the equipment used at Tyre was brought south and adapted for the new battlefield. Towers, catapults, battering engines, and mining operations all became part of the pressure. The goal was exhaustion. Break the walls, stretch the defenders, force them to respond everywhere. Make the fortress pay for every day it refuses to submit. The defenders answered with the same determination. They repaired damage. They fought from the walls. They counterattacked when they could. Gaza did not collapse because Alexander arrived. It resisted for weeks, and according to some accounts, for several months. The siege became a test of endurance. At Gaza, Alexander's army had to prove it could keep grinding forward when glory disappeared into labor, dust, and wounds. Finally, the pressure began to tell. The siege mounds brought Macedonian engines close enough to attack the walls effectively. Mining and repeated bombardment weakened sections of the defenses. Breaches opened. Alexander ordered assaults. The first attempts failed. The defenders fought fiercely at the broken walls, where every opening became a narrow killing ground. A breach does not mean a city has fallen. It means the battle has moved to the most dangerous point. The attacker must climb through broken stone under missiles and blades. The defender knows exactly where he is coming. The Macedonians attacked again. Still, Gaza held. But Alexander did not stop. On another assault, the Macedonians forced their way in. Once enough men reached the wall and opened space for those behind them, the defense began to crack. The fighting moved inside the city. At that point, Gaza's strength became its prison. The walls that had protected it now trapped its defenders with the enemy inside. Badis had resisted until the last practical moment, but no relief army came. No Persian field force arrived. No fleet could save the city. The fortress fell. The aftermath was brutal. Ancient sources say the male defenders were killed and many women and children were sold into slavery. The numbers vary, but the severity is not in doubt. Alexander made Gaza an example. There is also a darker story preserved by Quintus Curtius Rufus. According to that later Roman account, Badis refused to submit after the city fell and was executed in a cruel imitation of Achilles dragging Hector. Modern historians treat the details with caution because our sources differ, but the story survived because it captured how savage the end of the siege was remembered to be. Whatever the exact version, Badis did not surrender the city easily, and Alexander did not forgive the resistance. With Gaza taken, the road to Egypt was open. This was the strategic result that mattered most. Alexander could now move south without a hostile fortress sitting behind him on the coastal route. The last major Persian stronghold between the Levant and Egypt had fallen. Egypt did not resist him in the same way. When Alexander entered the country, he was received not as a destroyer of cities, but as a liberator from Persian rule. He went to Memphis. He offered sacrifices. He was recognized in Egyptian royal terms. Then he went to the coast and founded a new city, Alexandria. But none of that could happen safely while Gaza stood. That is why this siege matters. Gaza was not a battle of giant armies. It was not a dramatic cavalry charge. It was not the fall of the Persian king.
It was something colder and more practical. A fortress on the road, a commander who refused to submit, an army forced to build, dig, climb, bleed, and repeat until the walls gave way. At Tyre, Alexander had shown that he could cross the sea. At Gaza, he showed that he could raise the earth itself against a city. Both sieges proved the same thing. Alexander won because he adapted. If a city stood on an island, he built a causeway. If a city stood too high, he built mounds. If walls held, he brought engines. If engines failed, he mined. If the first assault was repelled, he tried again.
The defenders of Gaza delayed him. They wounded him. They forced him into another hard siege after the exhaustion of Tyre. But they could not stop him. When Gaza fell, the southern coast was secure. Egypt lay open. In Egypt, Alexander would become a pharaoh. He would found Alexandria. He would claim divine favor at Siwa. And then, with the coast secured behind him, he would turn back east, toward the battle that would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. Darius was still alive. Persia still had one last chance. And at Gaugamela, Alexander would face the largest army Darius could gather on a battlefield prepared for the final test.